Maybe, yes, got it. That must mean that Steve Robichon can hear us. Welcome, everybody. Oh, we don't have a video today, Steve, just so you're aware. We're in a different conference room, so you guys are gonna hear us, but you're not gonna see us. You just get to imagine today. And all you folks in virtual world, we'll get to see you hopefully. So our apologies, but we'll make it work.
No, we look really good, you guys. We look awesome. The best ever. Yeah, you're looking great.
All right. Well, we do have a nice full room, but welcome to the Thursday, April 21st, 2022 monthly PBAC meeting. There's a large group of us here at the U of I facilities, and we'll start with introductions and we'll go around the room here. My name is Kara Haley. I work for the city of Pullman, and I'm the current PBAC chair.
Paul Kimmel, I'm Lake County representative, and I want to just announce Tom Lamar, Commissioner Lamar, is conflicted. He's at a CETA housing meeting, so he sends his regrets. Don't mark him. Irresponsible.
All right.
Do we do that? I'm in trouble.
No, not really.
We're gonna mark me.
Huge.
Yeah. Different for the city of Moscow. I'm Gina Terusio. I'm part of the city of Moscow, and I'm not sure if there's anybody in the room I don't work for.
Heard that.
Tyler Palmer, City of Moscow. I work for Gina and Vice Chair of PBAC this year.
Mark Story, Whitman County Public Works.
Eileen McCall, Pullman City Council representative.
And Tim Link, Professor of Hydrology and UI representative.
Okay, and we do have three folks here with us as well. We'll start with Robin.
Oh, there's Dave.
Robin Nimmer is also Science and Engineering.
Quinn Buzzard, I'm a student at the University of Idaho, Department of Water Resources.
Jean Elliott, Community.
All right, and David, you want to give a quick introduction?
David Hall, Lake County.
Okay, we got David Hall. We're gonna switch over to virtual world. We're gonna start with Steve Robichon.
Steve Robichon, PBAC.
Oh, did I miss you guys? Thank you, Steve. And I'm gonna jump back to two other folks on my right because I'm spatially challenged today. I actually looked at the top and I saw Rusty. I was like, wait a sec. Anyways, Brian, please.
Yeah, Brian Johnson with the University of Idaho.
Rusty Vineyard, University of Idaho.
Yes, our very important folks here. All right, now we'll jump back to virtual world. Mike Parker.
Hi, this is Mike Parker. I'm City of Moscow.
Chris Beard.
Chris Beard, hydrogeologist, Department of Ecology, Water Resources Program.
All right, glad you're here today, Chris. We have David.
Dave Dalby, Viola resident.
Hi, Dave. Thanks for joining us today. Let's see, Jeff Lanigan.
Hi there, Jeff Lanigan, WCU Facilities.
All right, we have Michelle.
Yeah, this is Michelle Richmond with Idaho Department of Water Resources. I'm the regional manager here in Coeur d'Alene.
Glad to have you today, Michelle. Nathan.
Yeah, Nathan Weller, Pullman City Council.
All right, awesome. Thanks for joining us, Nathan. We have Patrick.
Hi, Patrick Cabbage, hydrogeologist with the Washington State Department of Ecology, Water Resources Program.
All right, awesome. And then I think we have Tom Handy, might be actually we have more.
Yeah, Tom Handy, Whitman County Commissioner.
Okay. And I'm looking at my list and I don't see anybody else.
Do we get to see the group video?
Yeah, if you caught us a little late, we're in a different conference room today and we are lacking a video camera, unfortunately. So we're gonna stare at all you pretty folks in virtual world instead. But we do have a presentation and some other things, so those will be popped up when those come up. So appreciate your guys' patience on not seeing us. With that, we'll move on to our second agenda item, which is approval of the meeting minutes from March 17th, 2022.
Madam Chair, I'd move to approve the awesomely prepared minutes from our March meeting.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
It was
Doesn't
a
matter.
battle of
It was
council
a council
members.
decision.
Yeah,
Call it that.
yeah,
That
doesn't
was-
matter, just say it was
Okay.
seconded, yeah.
It was seconded by Gina and Eileen at the same time. Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It looks like Tom was almost late there, but I think he was for it. So, with that, we'll move on, for public comment for items not on the agenda. So I would open it up for anyone in the room or anyone on the computer. You might have a comment that they would like to make.
Hi, Dave Dolby from Viola again here. I just have one question. The last meeting that was done, I think with the Pullman Women's Voters League, I think Paul Kimmel mentioned a PBAC awareness poll findings document. And I was just wondering if anybody can say where to find that document at.
Probably not. Is it on the website?
Should be on the website.
Okay, Paul.
Otherwise, I'll can leave it on today.
Okay, Paul thinks it might be on the website. I'll make a note to follow up and check on that, but he can also forward that to you directly, he said.
That'd be great, because I was on the website and I was trying to find it, but I was a little bit lost. There are a lot of titles I didn't recognize, so I may have just overlooked it.
No, actually, probably not. It's probably either not in a very obvious spot or presently we're without an executive manager, so a few of those things have slipped through the cracks. So we'll make sure you get a copy, and I'll also double check. Maybe we can see if Ashley can get it in an obvious spot on the website. So thank you for bringing that up. We'll make sure you get a copy.
Thank you.
Welcome. We had a comment over here.
Jean Elliott, I believe at the last meeting I misstated what NRCS stands for. I had suggested they possibly might be a resource for information on passive recharge of the aquifer or conservation of lands, anything like that. And NRCS stands for Natural Resources Conservation Service. I said national, but it's natural resources.
Great. Well, thank you for the clarification. All those acronyms, I get them mixed up in my head. So thank you. All right. Any other public comments? A few seconds. Okay. We will move on to our presentations and discussion portion. First on our list, we're going to be hearing from Quinn Buzzard. I'll give a brief little background, and I'm sure you're going to go into it more. But this would be the final results from a 3-year study, roughly?
2-year study.
2-year study,
Yeah,
okay. You're working under Jeff Langman.
Yep.
All right, and you've been evaluating recharge using seismometers.
Yes,
And it's
passive seismology.
Super fascinating. So I'm going to pass it off to you because you'll explain it way better than I will.
Sounds like a plan.
All right, and we're going to share, Steve, I know you have the presentation, but we're going to share it from this end so that Quinn can control the remote. If I can figure out what I'm doing here. Right here.
Is your thesis presentation, Quinn, or is this?
This is the thesis that we did. This is not the thesis presentation. This is just something that I drew up for PBAC.
Right.
Yep. Yep. I'm sure someone will see the final product.
There's
Cool. I brought this is one of our seismometers that we use to record all the data. Everyone likes a visual aid, so this is just one of the cool things we have. It's nothing fancy to look at, but I thought it'd be cool to help visualize some of the equipment that we get to use.
Can folks in virtual world see the presentation?
Yes.
I wonder if we could.
Okay. We probably can.
Yeah, this is it.
You can minimize them or just take them away.
Actually, why don't Rusty, you or I keep the remote and we'll give you, Sarah, you might want a pointer.
Cool. That's
That
better.
works.
You got one better on that. Yeah, that little
Yeah,
tiny
you
link
can
to the
go all the
very-
way down.
Arrow. Yeah.
Yeah, there you
All
go.
the way. There we go.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Cool. Can you guys online hear me okay?
Or if you just want me to click, I'll click for you.
Okay, that'd be cool.
Hit the space bar.
Can everyone online hear me okay? I just want to make sure I'm speaking loud enough.
It's good, Quinn.
All right, beautiful, sweet. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Quinn Buzzard. As I've already introduced myself, I'm a student here at the University of Idaho Water Resources Program, and my advisor is Jeff Langman. And over the past 2 years here in Moscow, we have been working on attempting to quantify aquifer recharge at the mountain fender interface using passive seismology. So just kind of a conceptual model of what's going on in our basin. I mean, people have been working to answer this question in our basin for decades, and no one's really come up with a great answer yet. So today I'm doing my best to take a stab at it. And a lot of the research in the basin previously helped build a conceptual model of where recharge might be occurring in our basin. Most specifically, John Bush has done a lot of work in the geology and has identified a primary recharge pathway along the mountain front interface composed of unconsolidated sediments nestled between the granite bedrock of the basin and the basalt flows of the Columbia River basalt flows. So as you can see here, this little yellow section are all these unconsolidated sediments, and that's where we're theorizing the majority of recharge is entering our aquifer system. The previous work that PBAC has funded in the past, work from Duquette and Behrens et al., have worked in attempting to identify fast and slow recharge pathways within the basin using isotopic analysis of water. And from that, they've identified some of these fast and slow recharge pathways along the mountain front interface. This little graph in the bottom right, the circles with more blue in them represent faster recharge pathways. And so we kind of come into this problem where how do you measure aquifer recharge without seeing the water? So how are we going to quantify recharge without drilling new wells? And this is where passive seismology comes into play. So there's a relationship that's shared between seismic velocity and groundwater level. And this is related to water level, pressure, and density. So the way this works is as groundwater level increases, there's more hydraulic pressure on the area beneath it. Just like when you go to the bottom of a swimming pool, your ears feel all that pressure. So that same pressure is being exerted in what's called pore space, which is space between these little sediments. And as more water is on top of these sediments, more pressure is exerted on these pores, which separates these little sediment grains apart from each other, actually decreasing the total bulk density of this sediment package. And with a decrease in density, you actually have a decrease in velocity, because velocity is dependent upon the density of the medium it travels through. So as you can see here, where there's a high water level, there's more space between these sediments, decreasing the velocity, decreasing the density, and vice versa for this. So as groundwater level increases, you'll have a decrease in seismic velocity. And this correlation is what we're using to estimate groundwater levels and recharge. So I mentioned this, passive seismology, the ambient seismic field. What is this thing? Not a lot of people know about seismology. So here is a visual description of a seismogram. These are things most people see when we're talking about earthquakes. So this is actually an earthquake that we measured here. This little tiny portion with all these little tiny scribbles, this is actually what's called the ambient portion of the spectrum, which are all these low frequency waves that are generated from natural earth movements and human movements and activities. So like wind, when it blows on a tree, sends out vibrations in the surrounding medium, and we can actually measure those. Same thing when we drive our cars or run farming equipment. All those vibrations we can measure, and that's part of the ambient portion of the spectrum. So that is the type of seismic waves that we are analyzing for this study. And we actually installed 11 seismometers across the mountain front interface to attempt to quantify and estimate groundwater levels. So here's an example of the raw seismic data that we get from a seismometer like the one I passed around. So we're actually looking at this little tiny section right in here, this little blue band between 10 to the 0 and 10 to the -1. It's actually correlating to 2 to 4 hertz, which is human-generated noise. So we're looking at human-generated noise for this study. And the way this works is you get seismic data from each of one of these seismometers, and you measure the time lag distance between when one seismometer measures a wave and when the other one measures a wave. And since you know the time lag between those two and the distance between the two stations, you can calculate a speed of the wave. Then you calculate that speed of the wave every day of the year and figure out how it's increasing or decreasing, and so on and so on. And then from these seismic velocities, you can correlate that with the groundwater level, estimates of recharge, and so on. So that's kind of how this process works. So here's a figure that actually came from you guys, and this is actually a figure of all your guys' monitoring wells within the basin. And as you can see, I've circled this little this little red circle over there across the mountain front interface. And as you can see, there's not a lot of dots in there. We have a groundwater monitoring gap in data. There's not a lot of monitoring wells out there. We don't really know what the water level is fluctuating at this mountain front interface, which we theorize where all the recharge is coming from. So this really emphasized the need to expand this groundwater monitoring network. And that's the beauty of passive seismology is we can expand the groundwater monitoring network just by comparing it with one well. So we actually have one well in here. You can kind of barely see it. It's a red dot. It's actually the Elliott well. Not sure if you guys are familiar with it, but it's just east off of 95, like just past Lewis Road, kind of over in that area. So that's where we're correlating all these groundwater levels to. So here's a hypothetical scenario. This was in our proposal. The actual seismic locations varied a little bit based off of landowner permission and so on and so on. But this is the well that we're comparing all of our groundwater level estimates to, is right here, the Elliott well. And the way that we're setting up this study is we have all these different seismic stations, and we pair each seismic station to another, 2, 2, 2, as seen over there in that little description. And then we estimate groundwater level and recharge between each station pair, and then you sum all the station pairs to get recharge across the mountain front interface. And then the beauty of this is that by doing it by pairs, you can identify which areas contribute more to recharge and which areas contribute less to recharge. So here's actually our final map. So out of the 11 seismometers that we installed, only 6 of them had usable data. So usable data is defined as low frequency waves that are recorded by our seismometer that are within this 2 to 4 hertz frequency range, which is human generated noise. So we ended up with 6 out of the 11, and that's what we used to calculate these final results. So here's an example. I know it's a little crazy with all these squiggly lines going everywhere, but the most important thing.
Do you want questions at the end, or do you want us to ask as you go?
Feel free, jump on it. You guys.
With half of them not generating, or I guess a little bit less than half of them not generating data, why is that, do you think?
It is just based off of the individual site characteristics. So some stations just didn't have enough activity near them to actually generate any of this noise. So some of these stations were, you know, way out in the middle of nowhere or higher up on the mountain front interface. So there wasn't enough human noise around it for us to use the data to be correlatable to other stations. So in order to correlate between 2 stations, they have to have the same waves being measured, or else you can't correlate the speed at which the wave travels through. So you have to be measuring the same waves. So some stations were able to record these waves generated by mostly farming equipment and traffic, and other ones were too far away, they weren't able to pick up any of that noise. So that's kind of why we had to reduce some of these stations. Yeah, so here's our example of what I talked about earlier about this relationship between groundwater level and seismic velocity. These are all the different stations' seismic velocity and how they vary throughout the year. And then in black is the transducer or groundwater level from the Elliott well. So the main takeaway from this is you can see that seismic velocity is decreasing during a period of high water level, and seismic velocity is increasing during a period of low water level. So this is where you can see this relation starting to form and how we estimate groundwater level from seismic velocity. So then I won't go into the nitty-gritty about how we estimated these water levels, but basically this is the final product of how we did it after we estimated all of them. So each of the colored lines are the estimates of water level for each segment, and then the black line is the water level from the transducer. So as you can see, they all follow the same path. It tends to underpredict water level in periods of high water level and overpredict it in periods of low water level. We're not exactly sure why this is happening, but we're taking a guess and saying it has something to do with trapped gases within the sediments and things like that, which cause these fluctuations. And what's really interesting about this is we used one groundwater level, like one monitoring well, and expanded it across the entire mountain front interface by using passive seismology. So the application for expanding groundwater monitoring networks with passive seismology, you know, it seems like it has great potential. It tended to accurately estimate groundwater level up to about 0.5 meter, which is about 1.5 feet. So it seems to be a pretty good estimate of groundwater level.
I got a quick question.
Yeah, fire away.
It looks like the purple especially takes on a different pattern. Is that located much further away from the well? I mean,
It is, which is the interesting part is the purple is actually the one that's furthest away from the transducer well, and it seems to be the most accurate. These estimates are dependent upon the seismic noise that it captures and measures, and it just happened to be that the station pair F happened to be where we got the best signal of low frequency waves. So that's why I had one of the best correlations, because we had the best signal that we measured.
So where was F located? Was that the one out at Robinson
So
Park?
F was located near Robinson Park.
Yeah, so,
Yep.
okay.
Mhm.
Right by the highway, so, or not highway.
Yeah, but it's
Yeah.
closer to a main intersection or something, so you get a lot more of this human-generated noise because you're next to a park. So people are driving around, people are stomping around, things like that. So you get a good signal on that side. Sweet. So you've all been waiting on the edge of your seats.
Yeah, really.
Here it is. Here's the number. Here's the number. The good news is it's bigger than what you guys expected, but I want you to take this with a grain of salt. So we estimated an annual recharge of 255,000 cubic meters, which is the equivalent of about 67.4 million gallons per year. As compared to the PBAC model that you guys have been working on, we applied that same aerial infiltration rate to the same area and got about a tenth of what we measured. So we're attributing this much higher recharge rate to these fast pathways, which I talked about earlier. These fast pathways are composed of paleochannels, which are ancient stream bed networks that were rerouted with each basalt intrusion over time. And so as you can see, recharge is spatially variable. Here you have A through C, which is the western portion of the network, much lower recharge rate as compared to the eastern section of the network, D through F, which has much higher recharge rates. And then you have a summation of all the recharge at the top per day.
Can I ask another question?
Fire away.
Can you go back one slide, Rusty?
Yeah.
Okay, so you noted that you compared it to the same area.
Yes.
Do you know roughly how many, basically it was that red circle that we saw, roughly?
Technically not. The red circle is just a theoretical recharge zone.
Okay.
What I did is I took the area of the everything up gradient to the top of the mountain front all the way down to the seismic network, and that was the area I used.
Okay, so the 26,250 cubic meters per year, that was
If
the
I
recharge
applied
rate that was applied in the model over the smaller area.
over the small area that I was
It wasn't
working
the
in.
total recharge that
Yeah.
the model estimated over the full basin. Okay,
Exactly.
I'll be
Yes.
curious to see
You're
that
right.
number.
So this is just a little teeny portion
Okay.
of recharge zone, I think 2 is what you guys classified,
Yeah.
the crescent shape. So this is only one little teeny little piece of the entire recharge zone 2. But I have that little piece, we calculated a much higher number. And that's because of the unique geology of the area, which I'll talk about here shortly.
And I know you're putting together a report. Will
Mhm.
that kind of define the area that you're estimating this recharge is taking place over in the mountain region?
Yes, I can actually, so the way that it calculates, if you want to go right here, if this works. So the way that the recharge area is calculated is everything from this point to the top of the watershed and so on. So you have this weird shape,
That makes sense.
polygon, everything up gradient of the network.
Cool.
So that's where we're measuring recharge for.
Okay.
If you want to go back a few.
You got it.
Thank you for humoring
One
my-
more. There we go. Perfect. So these recharge rates, like I was mentioning, much higher along the eastern portion as compared to the western portion. And we think, well, why is this? And as we know, groundwater is dependent upon the geology, upon the medium it travels through. So the eastern half of the portion had much lower clay content, had much more sand content, which increases your hydraulic conductivity. You have all of these paleo channels over there interspersed between there, along with a much thicker saturated interval, which is basically how much water is underground in a 2D rectangle, pretty much. And so this is because that the granite bedrock was much deeper on the western portion than the eastern portion. Oh, opposite. Eastern portion is deeper, the western portion is shallow. Excuse me. And yes, the important thing to this, that little, boom, 78%. So out of this entire network, 1/2 constituted almost 80% of the recharge that is occurring. So you really get this idea that there's a fast recharge pathway along the western portion of our network. So somewhere along northwest of Robinson Park, there tends to be, that's the primary recharge pathway that we've identified. Cool, so here's an example of the geology that I was talking about and how it affects your recharge. So we're using Darcy's law to calculate recharge. Hopefully some of you are familiar with this. It's basically an energy gradient and the hydraulic conductivity of the medium is what you use to calculate these. So as you can see, we're working west to east on here. A is the furthest west, which is corresponding to 1, and going down and so on and so on. And so as you can see, the hydraulic conductivity increases as you go west, which will increase the amount of recharge you get, as well as your saturated thickness. So there's a thicker column of water along the western portion, the eastern portion of the network. So you can see saturated thickness is increasing, as well as hydraulic gradient, which is your energy gradient. So as you have a higher hydraulic gradient, you'll be able to push more water through this medium because there's more of an energy gradient to do so. And then the way that this is calculated is you multiply all of these together, and then you actually get that recharge rate at the end. over here, right there. So for overlapping segments, we actually average the recharge to avoid double counting. So that's kind of why you see that little split. But as you can see, the amount of recharge greatly increases from west to east. So this is a comparison between David's work. He did, 2021 is when he did it, the last year, 2 years ago, something like that. This is the work that he was doing. As you can see, we kind of identified the same fast pathway. His blue circles with majority blue, those indicate fast recharge pathways. And the area that I've decided, well, that I've calculated has a higher recharge portion is actually overlapping within that same area. So it seems to be that we've been identifying this primary recharge pathway with majority of recharges occurring somewhere around Robinson Park, northwest of Robinson Park. And like I mentioned earlier, all of these little paleo channels. So this is what John Bush described as paleo channels, these little red little stream deposits in here. You have all these interspersed between there, and these provide high conductivity pathways for recharge to move throughout the medium. And this is why we're attributing that this western portion has a much higher recharge rate, as well as this little green portion here, which is the eroded basement rock. And as you have greater amounts of eroded basement rock, it also increases the amount of increases the hydraulic conductivity and recharge. So some next steps. So I know you guys are all chasing after the recharge thing. That's what PBAC's all about. You guys have been working on this groundwater model. So I'm not going to stand up here and pretend like I know everything about the groundwater model, but here's just some suggestions that I have to maybe incorporate this work into it. So of course, incorporating these fast recharge pathways into groundwater models. The way that it's split up is you have these two recharge zones, 2 and 1, 1 being the lowlands, 2 being the mountain front interface area. However, the mountain front interface has such a unique geology, you really need to dive deeper into the geology and identify where these paleo channels and greater eroded bedrock can be to understand where these faster recharge pathways can be occurring. So then to account for the spatial variability of recharge, I'd recommend breaking down the recharge zones into smaller segments so you can capture these fast recharge pathways, as well as calibrating the groundwater model to the new recharge estimate that I provided. But take that with a grain of salt because this is only for the small area up gradient of my network. So that's important. Don't apply it to the whole recharge zone. Sweet. So just in summary, yes, we've calculated a much higher recharge rate, about tenfold of what you guys have, which is good news. More water is always good. Not so great news is we're 67 million gallons per year, which is way, way less than our pumping rates. So we're still in a deficit here, which is not great news. Also, it's really important to note that recharge is spatially variable because of these fast recharge pathways. So it's really, really important to understand the geology of the area you're working in, be able to identify these fast recharge pathways, these high conductivity pathways, to help better represent how recharge is occurring in the system. That's all I got for you guys today.
That was cool.
Super cool.
Sweet. I'd be happy to take any more questions. I know it's a lot of stuff, but I mean, I'll be putting out some more reports for the thesis and stuff like that you guys can check out. But
Quinn, would you see any value to continued research that takes a look at further areas, since the areas are fairly, I guess it could be highly variable based on those channels? Would you think it would be valuable to get more resolution along the entire crescent of what we anticipate to be the recharge zone?
yes, I think recharge is just entirely dependent upon the geology of which it travels through. So being able to understand the medium at which groundwater travels through is entirely dependent upon the recharge rate. So it's extremely important to understand the geology. However, interpreting geology is a difficult thing to do. I mean, when things are so far underground, it's hard to tell. And these paleo channels are so small, it's like pulling a needle out of a haystack, being able to find one of these. It's going to be nearly impossible. So of course, it's important to allocate time and resources to understanding the geology, but you have the trade-off of how difficult the data might be to capture.
So do you think we were highly lucky to have apparently found one of these recharge channels with the scope of this work?
So let's do this. So the way that I applied these paleo channels is I didn't actually go drill a hole and be like, oh, hey, look, here's some riverbed sediments. I actually just made an assumption that said, based on this much of area beneath the ground surface, there's this paleo channel per depth. So I kind of made some assumptions, and which just happened to align with some other data. So I do think that we were extremely lucky in being able to find this. Is it impossible to do for other places? No, but it will definitely take a lot of resources to do. So I think the first thing that is most important is just to reevaluate geological assessments that we have available that previous people have done, and just reevaluate the way that you guys are assigning these geological stratifications in the model.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Okay.
This is Kara. I have another question. If you were to do this again, what would you do differently?
Oh, that's a great question. I would love to redo this whole thing because there's so much potential within this project. And when I first started this project, I didn't know anything about seismology. So I put all these stations in here hoping to get these things. And as you could see, 5 of them didn't turn out with anything I wanted. So if I could do this again, I'd reevaluate traffic patterns, things like that, harvesting schedules, and try to place these seismometers in places where they get the maximum amount of ambient noise.
Right.
So I think that would be the best way to redo this project, would to be placing these seismometers in more strategic locations to get a better signal.
And I seem to recall, this is relatively inexpensive technology, isn't it?
Extremely inexpensive, yes. This seismometer right there is about $150. And then it's incorporated with the solar panel, which you can get off of Amazon for like $80. And then you just put it in a plastic storage container that you buy from Walmart with some sand and a piece of rock and a car battery, and that's it. So it's super, super cheap. That's one of the reasons that we did this. It's really, really inexpensive to get lots of quality data. So yes, great point.
Quinn, good job, really good job. I'm just trying to think. So we know there's some research going on, but we don't know where it's going, right? So
yeah,
is there a next step, like putting tracers in that water up on the side of the mountain, and then maybe at our Mountain View well, our new test well?
Is that in yet?
No.
Okay, I didn't think so. I was on the email list waiting to get that.
I'm just trying to figure out, okay, so what does that connectivity look like exactly?
And that's a great question. I mean, the geology of this basin is so complex, and the paths that groundwater take are so tortuous. So even by putting a tracer in there, the likelihood of you being able to pull that tracer back out is probably not very high.
Yeah.
So I don't know how you'd be able to identify these actual pathways, because there's a million different pathways it can take. I think the main thing about identifying a pathway is just identifying an overall area in which has a higher possible hydraulic conductivity. That would be a good place to start. But with tracers and things like that, that's a little outside of my realm of knowledge.
Quinn.
It's an online question.
Yep. Hey, Jeff.
Hey, Quinn, everyone in class is telling you to do more geochemical tracers.
I would be happy to see if anyone has geochemical tracer knowledge or previous experience, because that is outside of my realm of expertise. Although, if you guys are interested, I mean, they did a whole bunch of isotope tracers and stuff like that. David and Kyle did, so.
Yeah, we had that project. I was wondering, with as inexpensive as it is to deploy, would it potentially make sense down the road to have a broader network that you then just kind of chase back into the basin and use some of these other wells to correlate the data as you move back toward town?
Yeah, it'd be great to be able to have a large network of these seismometers installed. I mean, there's just, like you said, it's so cheap and you get so much great data out of it. It would greatly, yeah, just help us understand more about the groundwater fluxes within the area. So yeah, if we were able to strategically place these in better places to get a better signal, yeah, I think there's a lot of great utility.
And do you think that there could be some value? Say that we identified 200 spots. We funded a project, identified 200 spots on a network coming down off the crescent down toward the city, a couple different wells that you correlate with. Would there be value to an ongoing project like that that's taking place for several years?
Yeah, I think there's definitely utility in using passive seismology for that purpose. I mean, the amount of work that's required in upkeeping these systems is extremely low. I went out about once a month to do a data download. You can go out, I think it has like up to 90 days, so about 3 months before you have to go download the data. I went out on a month-by-month basis to make sure that there wasn't any malfunctioning equipment and stuff like that. But you can pretty much just set these up and let them go, and they'll do their own thing. So there's a lot of utility in installing these. I think it's just finding the right place to put them and finding someone who's willing to man them and interpret the data, because the data analysis is quite rigorous for seismic data. So I think that's also a big piece is the equipment itself is really easy to use.
Well, I know you think you're moving, but when you end up back in Moscow, because Moscow gets.
It's official, man. I already got a job.
I know, you'll come back. You'll come back.
Sign it off.
You'll come
Hey.
back. Tell them to. And then you can do that project for us.
Yeah, no, I'd be happy to. I mean, passive seismology is a really cool field, and it's just starting to be applied more and more. So I guarantee you over the next 10 years, you're going to see a lot more stuff about passive seismology.
And
Hey,
congratulations on the
Quinn?
job.
Yeah, Jeff.
It's good to remind them that this is only under those conditions, and that type of seismometer and that work is only useful in the alluvial aquifer. Once we hit the basalts, it won't work.
Yeah.
Very correct. That's a very important thing, and that's why we applied this within this mountain front interface, is because it's composed of these unconsolidated sediments. So putting these seismometers on top of the basalt flows would give us no usable data. So it would have to be along this mountain front interface where these unconsolidated sediments and these superficial aquifers are. Yeah, great point, Jeff. Thank you.
But I got a couple questions.
Yeah.
The one is, do you have an uncertainty kind of estimate around that number? for
Around the
recharge?
groundwater level
Yeah.
estimates or around the recharge?
Around the recharge.
No, I don't have any uncertainties estimates that I've calculated, but I'm sure I could go back in there and make some calculations.
Yeah, that'd be interesting to see too.
To see a potential error range or something.
And then the other question is there any sort of a role for active seismometry with this, or is?
Yeah, I mean, active seismology gives you so much more interpretation of the geology beneath you, but it tends to be more expensive because you have to generate that noise.
Yeah.
And usually you need a better seismometer than that one to incorporate it. But yes, active seismology has a great potential in understanding the type of geological stratifications beneath us, for sure.
Hey, Quinn, remind us where you're headed.
Phoenix, Arizona, Department of Water Resources, adjudications.
Cool.
Yeah, congratulations. You're laying down the law.
Good program, that Water User Wisely program.
Yeah, they're great down there. It's been great working for them for the past month. So.
Right, we have a question from Jean.
Laywoman grasping what's going on here. This was on the Wanapum? This was on the upper aquifer?
This is just actually, we're inferring aquifer recharge that's occurring between the superficial aquifer entering all of the aquifers below, including the Winnipum and Grand Ronde. We have no discrimination technique as of now to tell how much recharge is entering which aquifer system. We can just tell that there's this much volume of water entering the entire aquifer system. We can't discriminate which one it's going into.
So this may actually indicate there is some recharge going on in the Grand Ronde.
Yeah, very possible, especially along this eroded bedrock pathway where it has a really high hydraulic conductivity. That provides a really fast pathway to reach really deep areas in the aquifer, such as the Grand Ronde.
And these paleo channels are pertinent to both the upper and the lower aquifers?
Yes, that's correct.
And how much of the basin is this alluvian composition versus the basalt composition?
In terms of percentages, I cannot tell you, but I know it is a fraction because pretty much all of the lowlands of the basin are all basalt flows, and the only area that has these unconsolidated sediments nestled between the basalt flow and the granite bedrock are along the mountain front interface. So it'd just be one little thin strip kind of following the Palouse Mountains.
But the water might eventually
Disperse.
throughout the whole basin.
That is correct, yes. It most likely recharge is occurring laterally from the mountain front interface and then dispersing laterally to the rest of the basin.
So this might be very valuable on where to put a huge reservoir for passive recharge.
You're 100% correct, yes. If the city of Moscow and PBAC decides to go towards applying a managed aquifer recharge system, such as like a reservoir, and trying to get some deep percolation from that to do some aquifer recharge, then yes, I would suggest putting it along this fast recharge pathway.
First question was mine. So.
Anyone in virtual world? I know it's a little hard to see us, but any questions?
This is Steve. I have a question.
Yeah.
Quinn, did you try to do an upgradient water balance to kind of get a feel of whether or not your recharge estimate is somewhere in the ballpark of what you'd expect based on a water balance?
Steve, that is a great question, as that is a question that we talk about in Jeff's class all the time. And all the other students have asked me this exact same question. And unfortunately, my answer is no. I have not done a water balance or everything upgrading of that. It would be a little challenging to do so just because of the stream networks and such. I'm not exactly sure how I'd go about creating a water balance and estimating surface runoff and things like that within just a small portion of the basin. So no, but if anyone's interested in taking it on, you are more than welcome to.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Steve.
This is Patrick. I had a quick question. You said that this methodology overestimated the water level highs and underestimated the lows.
Vice versa.
Vice versa.
Underestimated the highs and overestimated the lows.
Okay. And then like to what degree?
You know, like I said, about a half a meter, so 1.5 feet.
Okay, so that half a meter was that. Okay. Thank you.
Yes. Yep, no problem.
Other questions online or in the room? Thank you, Quinn, and this was really interesting.
But thanks so much.
Thanks all for having me. It's been fun. Thanks for funding all my stuff. I wouldn't have been able to do all the research without you guys, so appreciate it.
Super interesting.
Thank you. It's an exciting field, and I hope someone else takes it up after I leave.
And you're an Avista scholar too, so.
Yes, and an Avista scholar, so thanks to Vista for helping fund some of the research too, so.
Yeah.
And again, we'll welcome you back with open arms when you come back.
Yeah, 5 years, I'll probably be back up here.
You can deploy a whole network.
Yeah, I mean, Arizona, you know, who can stay in Arizona for too long?
There you go.
You come back when you cook.
Exactly. Great, thanks, guys.
Thank
Thank you. Have a good one.
Okay. All right. That was super fascinating. We will move on to our second item under presentations and discussion. This is more of a discussion or a brief discussion at this point, but it's our basin boundary modification. I'll attempt to give a little background. I made a couple notes for myself so I don't forget. So since our last PBAC meeting, and a couple months ago, we approached the committee and talked about the concept of revising the basin boundary based off of new information. It was somewhat spurred on by the WSU model work, but Steve and John Bush have been collaborating quite a bit in the background. On March 21st, John Bush did provide PBAC with more or less a written boundary proposal. So he put in a lot of really good effort to basically explain in detail the proposed revisions to the basin boundary. And Steve did a wonderful presentation too, kind of laying out the way that things have evolved over the years. So that's a little bit of a backstory. What I would like to do moving forward is after this meeting, we'll have Steve send out that proposal report to the full PBAC committee. I think a few members did receive it because they were on the research subcommittee, so it came out that way. But our plan would be to have a really thorough discussion and a brief presentation from John Bush next meeting as well about it. But I'd really ask and encourage all the committee members to read through that. It's not too many pages, actually have it here. So it's not real thick, but to read through that, and we'll have a much, I mean, ideally we would potentially look to adopt that new basin boundary at the next meeting. But we could also open it up for questions of John Bush. We could have a thorough discussion. So that would be your homework, would be to read through that. If we can arrange it for the subcommittees to do a bit of work on this side, I would prefer that as well. We can also follow up after next meeting as needed. But I would like the research subcommittee to kind of tackle it from a technical perspective, make sure that there's I mean, I can't imagine that there won't be because we have some of our very good minds on it, but make sure that the technical side seems to jive and that there's no questions there. And then at our meeting where we talked about this before, we talked about the communications subcommittee spending a little bit of time thinking about the implications associated with changing the boundary. They could do a little bit of brainstorming about how maybe we would roll it out to the community, what that might look like. Steve's done a good job of, I mean, really what it means is we've pulled the boundary back from Colfax and we'd be putting the boundary back with the city of Palouse more so. So there's probably some implications associated around that. Are there ways for us to engage more with Palouse as a result? So I just want the committee members to be thinking about some of these things so we can have a really informed discussion. And like I said, keep in mind, John Push has put in a lot of effort to it. So if we can be prepared, he's going to take time to give a mini presentation on it and answer questions. So that's really just my pitch to you all in the next month to do that. And Steve, Tyler, anything to add? You guys have been involved with those conversations.
No, I think you covered it well, Kara. I think it's something that's overdue, and it'll be good to have the conversation about and make sure that we're in alignment with the most current information we have.
Mm-hmm. So Steve, maybe send that out to the full committee sometime in the next couple of days, and I guess, Paul, you're the communication person, and Sean on the research side. Hopefully there'll be a way to maybe coordinate for those groups to meet once between now and that follow-up meeting. That would just be my request. Any questions on that? Yes.
The IDWR Palouse Basin adjudication boundary is different than the Palouse Basin aquifer boundary. Does that mean that some of the wells and everything that they were getting water rights on are parts of a different aquifer?
So the way the state designates their basin boundaries is the river, the Palouse River, that basin. So
you're talking about the surface sources rather than
all
the
the stream
aquifer.
flow, essentially from Skyline up through Harvard. All of that is part of the Palouse Basin, as per the water resource designation of this geographical area. All of the water that drains into the Palouse River, essentially.
So that's different. That's different than the boundaries of the aquifer, which is what this group.
Yeah, which is underground and much more unknown. It's less on the surface.
So yes, your question, yeah, there are wells
But some of the
outside
rights,
of our basin that are part of the Palouse Basin adjudication. Sure.
okay.
Yeah.
So it's, they were asking for your right to use water, but the source of the water for, in the adjudication, some of it was the Palouse Basin aquifers, but other people in the adjudication, their water that they're wanting to get rights for is from some outlying aquifer, right?
So, Madam Chair, yeah, maybe Michelle?
Yeah, I don't want to put you on the spot, Michelle, but if you have anything to chime in on this regard. Oh, and I think you're muted, sorry. There we go.
I'm afraid I can't answer just on the spot because I wasn't here for that adjudication. And if you want to clearly ask your question, I can get an answer and email it back.
I think I already figured out my answer.
Okay.
The rights were for some of the Palouse Basin water and some outside of the Palouse Basin aquifers.
But it's all for surface, it's all for surface water.
The Palouse River.
So it's, I mean, so for the water rights, yeah, it'd be for the actual river sources or for ponds.
No, you were doing wells in the adjudication.
Were they doing wells too?
Oh,
Oh, okay, I
Yeah.
didn't know they did.
The
boundary.
But the boundary is boundaries. Yeah, so the boundary is different. I think you've got your question. Yeah,
I
I
think
understand.
the adjudication involved
A
the
lot-
water we're
a
talking
larger-
about,
A
and
lot
it's
larger
talking,
area.
yeah,
It
and other water.
covers, it covers all of what is the Palouse Basin that we're talking about here, but it also has areas that are outside of the Palouse
Right.
Basin. Yeah.
Do those aquifers have names then, too?
I'm not as familiar with the aquifers outside of ours, but yeah, it covers water, like surface water sources. It's all the Palouse River Basin, so that's not all within our aquifer.
And the Flanagan Creek alternative, that's not in the Palouse Basin, is it? It looks like it's up over on that,
It's part of the
Mountain.
adjudication basin, yeah.
Yeah.
right, but
Right.
it's not part of the, it's not within the boundary of the,
Not,
of your PBAC boundary.
It gets confusing because, yeah,
Yeah.
it's in the topographic basin of the Palouse River, but not in the groundwater basin.
Right.
Yeah.
and I think the discussion about the boundary changes, we'll kind of see where we believe our Palouse Basin boundary that we manage and keep an eye on includes a little bit of Viola. So the salt flows kind of poke into Viola around
But not that far east
but not that far east. No. We're up against
in the mountains.
sediment at your basement rock.
Right. Well, let's move on to unfinished business. The first bullet item I have listed here is the PBAC Executive Director position vacancy. That's very wordy. Brian, can I ask you to give an update on where we're at? Since you're really
Sure.
leading the charge and
Sure. UI announced the position. We had a good pool of applicants. We've begun the process of reviewing and narrowing and expect to interview soon. And I'll speak to a targeted 3 May date when we hope to have a more of a public interaction with any finalists identified at that point. So you can be looking for information from the search committee in the coming couple weeks. But you might sort of target the opportunity to interact with finalists on the 3 May date.
yeah, probably 4 to 6 timeframe, late afternoon. So we're still squaring away some of the details associated with that, but that is the intent and the general plan for now, and we'll share more details along those lines.
So the first round of interviews on Friday, so we'll be
Tomorrow. Okay. So, yeah.
Quick question, are you the supervisor for this person, Brian?
The position that I'm currently in is slated to be the supervisor, but it may be shifting to Rusty.
Okay. Yes,
I'm stepping away from the university.
It's just going back to its original.
Well, anyways, I want to thank both Rusty and Brian and U of I for spearheading the process, because it is involved and it takes time and resources to work through all that, and everybody on the subcommittee that's helping with that effort. So thank you all. Hopefully we'll have some good news or some more specific updates at the next meeting. And like Brian said, keep an eye out for some emails for information to hopefully provide some additional feedback on potential hires. Any questions? We will move on to subcommittee reports. I know, let's see, we probably don't have much of a budget report update.
No, we haven't really discussed budgets since the last time Corey brought a group of us together to talk about what we want the budget to look like moving forward. But I definitely, with the executive director coming on board, better understanding that. I know one of the topics with, it was on the budget today, the membership status. I mean, I think that's going to directly correlate with, processes moving forward.
Communications, Paul.
Yes, leveraging the expertise and charisma of Robin and Alta, we've had several outreach engagements, League of Women Voters, both Moscow, Pullman. We have another one scheduled with the Whitman County Board of Realtors, and a few others out there. So we intend to just continue some regular cadence of outreach going forward. We'll figure that out. At some point, Robin's going to say, "I'm done. See you later." It's all yours. I know you are getting really better. And related to that, Idaho Water Resource Board has invited us to their May board meeting in Lewiston, right? So either the 19th or the 20th. My preference is the 19th, which is also PBAC Day, but see what they give us.
And I lose track of what happened in the last month, but we did meet with ecology. That was in the last month.
Yeah, but that was more in well, there's twofold. Again, updating ecology on the alternative supply project. So Robin did a great job of kind of walking through those alternatives. Good question, good interaction. We have the full slate of ecology there. Thank you, Patrick and Chris, for being part of that. What did you guys think? Was it a productive conversation? Must have been, okay.
Sorry, Paul, were you asking us?
Yeah, I was just curious. Did you think it was a productive meeting with your colleagues?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you guys, our feedback, there's been some similar feedback as we've met in the past that we've continued to share with PBAC, as far as, the likelihood of new summer water associated with some of the different alternatives. But we are still committed to working with PBAC to to, as the alternatives get refined and kind of path forward, get selected and gather some more information on what path PBAC wants to pursue, we're still committed to working with you guys in whatever that looks like. And we're obviously in full support of PBAC's mission and goals. So we're still in it for the long haul here.
Thanks, Patrick. Didn't mean to put you on the spot.
No, you're fine.
Good answer.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to the research subcommittee, and I'll have Sean give an update.
Thanks, Kara. So the research subcommittee has been reviewing the WSU model report. We passed along our review comments to Ben Kofer, who is the PhD student who prepared the model and then prepared the report. We also subsequently received a summary memo from Nick Engdahl, Professor Nick Engdahl with WSU, who put together an overall summary of what was in the report and the value of the model and what we could and could not use it for. The committee met last week to talk about, responses to our comments and what it means. We still want to have one more conversation with Nick Engdahl and get some feedback from him on our questions before we come back with a final report to the full committee. There are some limitations of the model, and I was actually very encouraged to hear the recharge discussion today, because a big challenge with the model is the recharge is just really not well defined. So yeah, pretty excited about that element. But yeah, we've got one more discussion we need to have with Professor Engdahl and then report back to the group.
Thank you, Sean. Paul so kindly pointed out to me that I missed a new business item. And I teased him because I have too many notes on my agenda sheet that I just overlooked it. So we're going to jump back to that item, and that is a rescission of the U of I research voting member status. So I'll do my best to give a little blurb about what that's about, and we can have a discussion. Steve and Tyler and other folks may have some good input associated around it. So I made a couple notes for myself. I mean, I think the big takeaway, roughly in 2007, WSU, U of I, Moscow, and Pullman put together an interagency agreement, basically an addendum to a previous agreement, in which all of those entities agreed to provide $20,000 worth of funding each year to specifically support specific research projects. That's kind of how that was worded. A lot of the folks on this committee are aware that for the past few years, we haven't had U of I willing to provide that funding. Also in that interagency agreement, so we do have other entities, of course, that contribute to the counties and whatnot, and they do not technically have a vote for research-related matters because they don't contribute to that fund. So I did check back in emails, and it looks like the last time that U of I paid that research funding was in May of 2019. And that was technically for the July 18th to June 19th timeframe. So it has now been a couple of years. I know a lot of different people have been trying to approach it at different angles in hopes that we can get that funding back. To date, we haven't been horribly successful. I know I'm optimistic we can get that back, but we wanted to bring it to the committee, at least as far as it's been some time, should the U of I members be able to keep voting on that in the meantime. I mean, our hope is we get it back and we can do that, but it's just been kind of something bounced around back and forth, and we wanted to have kind of a candid discussion about it and maybe how to approach it from here.
And I would say, I think that initially when the university first stopped the funding for the research portion, we're optimistic that would come back pretty quickly. It seemed like it was maybe a one-year crunch and some misunderstandings about how research was being pursued. Hasn't come back to this point. And in the agreement, it clearly states that those that are contributing are voting on research. And as Kara stated, we have people who contribute to administration who don't have research votes, and that's based on their non-participation in the research account. And so with the vote on the expenditure of research funds being the motivating factor to continue providing the research fund, I think it is time that we just have a conversation about that in hopes that the university decides that that's a worthwhile thing to fund again in the future. But necessarily to be that the contributing entities have the deciding votes on how those funds are expended. And so without the University of Idaho contributing to those funds, it's hard to see them continuing to vote on how they're expended.
So I guess you can look at it two ways, I think, or more. One is, actively funding, and one is that the university still has funds in research. And so that, I guess is that a substantive kind of difference? The agreement, the addendum really doesn't clarify. It just says, contribute an additional 20 or now 25. No, 27.5.
I think it's still 20.
Oh,
The
yeah,
only
yeah, straight up county
in the
research.
research.
Yeah.
So again, I guess that's the question I have is, absent specifics, do you throw them off the island?
Paul,
They've been carrying what?
to add to that is, I went through the entire folder to look through the bylaws and to look, that's the only addendum I came across. There's nothing really written that says you must annually give dollars, right? So I can stand with where Bradley Ritt's comments regarding, hey, it was well funded to a point of where it's at. And I think his request, and this could come along to the budget standpoint, is I think it'd be fairly simple. He's looking for what is the research agenda and how is it being spent down, so we can contribute. So in the eyes of, I've given 100,000, where's my 100,000 at? And if you haven't used it, it's like, why do I keep replenishing the pot until? So the tone I pick up from that is, I want to contribute, but what are you doing with my existing money? And I know in the last year or so, that's been aggressively spent down with projects moving forward. So I think there may be some communication pathways we can create that will help better understand. And maybe it's just a few people sitting around, if it's Tim or it's Brad, and groups from here of going like, how do you want to see the money reported out to you?
Yeah, that's a good point. And I guess my preference is, I don't think we need to ask. I think let's just continue allowing them, this is just me speaking, allowing them to vote, but as Rusty suggests, let's, the expectations are not, we're not aligned. So let's figure that out.
Well, I guess, my only point of concern is just having some sort of twilight where a one-time contribution of 20,000 doesn't buy Moscow a vote for 26 years. If that's the case, the university had requested additional information back in 2018, which resulted in the late payment that we got in 2019. And it was based on that identical conversation, and a document was put together that would show how the research funding had been spent and explain what the spending plan was. And at that point, the university then released the funding for that, but then in the subsequent year didn't fund it again. And so there was no, I guess there seemed to be, at least from my perspective, a desire that PBAC approach the university as though we're requesting a grant from the university. And for me, that's fundamentally at odds with what the spirit and intent of the research dollars were. That this was from the get-go, PBAC was a collaborative organization where the four entities came together and said, hey, you know what? Let's all throw some money in the pot and make this happen. And so for one entity to take a position of, hey, no, now you guys have to come beg me for this money, feels like that. And I'm not saying that PBAC shouldn't be accountable for the research dollars and there shouldn't be a spending plan at all. I'm totally on board with that, but I guess I do think we need to have some sort of provision where we twilight and say, okay, at this point, this is where that needs to stop. I don't think one-time contribution can be an indefinite vote on the research dollar expenditures.
How about if we have a conversation with them? That looks like.
But totally agree. I mean, and Brian, weigh in where you see, I mean, I think that's what, again, that's the tone I get. The tone that I'm getting has not come back to me. So I don't want to correct you or pick words out of your mouth, but it's not come back. I think if in 2018, if there was a spending plan put forward, I haven't seen in the documents, I haven't come across that. And so that'd be a great document to go back to go like, hey, remember, this is what we talked about. And how do we commit moving forward with, so it's not the point of annually, I gotta feel like I gotta twist your arm to get my money. It's an agreed upon, if it's another addendum, if it is an amendment to the bylaws that really call out the parties that are committed to moving people.
I can send that. It was a document that Gene Gustenhoven originally generated that I actually helped him with, that we sent over. And
that's a great reference point to go back to remind and remember where we were at.
Yeah, but I honestly think I think it may not have been in front of the right people either.
Yeah, very well.
That was my thought, something, we need something
Some
that,
transition.
yeah.
New VP of research.
I know Chris Nomura is very
Brett
interested in this
newer.
work.
Yeah.
So again, the history with.
Yeah, something that's gonna bridge the vagaries of personalities.
I was gonna propose something, actually, that's maybe a little, that will help with this, and this is not to add more to the research subcommittee, but I think what might be good is for the research subcommittee to come together and actually start to think a little bit more strategically and objectively in terms of what do we really want to go after in terms of sort of a long-term research plan. Yeah, I mean, and even if it is something we end up deviating from, at least to have an idea of that logical pathway. And then I think, because that's what I think the research office was looking for, and Brian's had some, we've all been kind of poking at them from different directions. And that was where they came back, is that they had requested that, but actually never received a response. But,
great idea.
But I think,
A strategic plan.
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And again,
Yeah,
it just
strategic plan,
a
yeah.
pathway forward. And I think actually that's where Nick Engdahl's document can help guide that a little bit, because I mean, he does have a nice prioritization of what the big unknowns are and where the best bang for the buck is. And I think we can take that, spin that into, it doesn't have to be a lengthy document, but at least a strategy going forward. And then you can deal with the budget issues.
Well, and I think that ties really well into the work that Alta and Robin are doing, as they finalize that. And one of the big things that we're gonna have to do as a committee is come together and decide what are our next steps and how do we maintain this momentum. And I think that having a lot of the data gaps that we feel, we'll be able to identify that research that will be necessary and put together a really nice, more formalized plan.
Yeah.
This is also just a good time, changing of things and a new executive director hopefully coming in soon. So, like they can spend a little time to maybe looking back at what has been done. It'd probably be a good exercise for that person anyways, to kind of familiarize themselves with some of the happenings. And, so I'm hearing that, and I agree with Paul to some extent, we haven't really done a balanced analysis to say, okay, you guys put this much in since 2007 and we've spent this much. And so I think we have some leeway in that regard, but if we can kind of tackle it proactively in the next year, that would be my request. Kind of what I'm hearing, if people agree with that.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that approach. I think if we should, have the research folks generate some of those next steps and plan, and then set up a conversation with the right folks at the university and get a determination on if it's something that they plan on re-engaging with or not, and then we can make that determination.
Doing research.
And maybe we need to kind of look at research as a whole anyways for all the entities with the plan of attack moving forward. So probably good timing. I mean, it's from 2007, so. I mean, we all know things have gone up in cost as far as research. We probably ought to be putting more aside. You have something you want to say, that's fine.
Interesting, the problem's water. And U of I is not contributing the research money for the research. But then they've already started to help the problem by using recycled water on the Arboretum.
Oh, yeah. Well,
Whereas WSU, they're contributing money, I assume, but haven't actually
different
been able to
challenges.
do the thing.
Yeah, that's the whole.
Different challenges,
that's a
but
whole
I think
different-
everybody is
I know
committed.
it's
Yeah.
involved.
I attended and watched the water summit down in Boise yesterday, and I think U of I, if I understand you or I'm misunderstanding you, U of I is very committed
I think that's what she said.
to
Yeah,
water.
they're
Water conservation.
helping
Yeah,
solve the
okay.
whole reason we're having the research.
Gotcha. I just want to make sure I understood your comment
No.
correctly.
Yeah, I think, everybody is
They're already
doing their
applying
part.
things.
Anyways, good discussion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're at 3:10. All right, so now that I've jumbled us around a little bit in the schedule, we are on to other reports and announcements. Did I miss anything, Paul? Okay.
Madam Chair, I've got one just real quick. I was able to attend the water summit down in Boise. Tim, thank you so much for the work you put into that. That was a really great event. I mean, it was high quality. The governor kicked it off. The Speaker of the House was there and gave a presentation, panels on water from all different angles. It was one of the best put together days on water, I think, that the state's seen in a long time. I was able to have a really good conversation with Chris Nomura, and I agree. I think the university is heading in a good direction, and I think that we can get something solved there. Also, Brian Patton, I was able to have a nice conversation with him while we were down there, and they're really looking forward to seeing the outcomes of the work. Brian is the executive staff for the water board, and so they're really
effort. We're still shouting about beavers at 9 o'clock at night. That's good. I mean, in a good way. Yeah, so, but it was just pleasing to see. No, it was.
Come up with any solutions?
I don't know about that, but
Yeah.
it was getting deep into philosophy at that point.
That's really good to hear.
It was really
For
positive.
sharing. All right. Okay, alternative water supply project update. I'm gonna put Robin on the spot, and she's gonna give us a little update on the happening.
Yeah, so there's, do you have a question?
I was just gonna say, I have to leave at 3:15, so I just thought I'd let you know, if I get up and walk away in about 5 minutes. It won't-
Not Robin.
Not Robin,
Just
so
let you know.
Noted. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so two things. One, we're working on the final report, that I'm hoping to submit the end of next week or the beginning of the following week. And then along with that, so then it'll go to PBAC, PBAC will review it, we'll get comments back, and then we'll turn around with the final report. With that, our current contract ends May 31st, and I'm thinking that we will have a little bit of money left over by the end of May. And so I'd like to request a no-cost extension to either July or August. And I talked to Kara and Tyler and Paul about this, just to be able to tie up loose ends with this report. If there's any dollars left, then we could do some continued outreach. And then if there is any follow-on work, you know, it kind of bridges that gap.
I would add, all the teams have been really helpful on the outreach aspect with all the presentations and things. And as we, Tyler mentioned it earlier, we need to kind of come together as a greater committee as this report comes out. We all need to carve out some time, I don't know what that looks like yet, to really decide what our next steps will be, to dive into that report closely, and to kind of strategize what our next steps will be. And I think, as Robin said, at this point, they're not asking for a cost extension on this, but there's probably going to be some small follow-up logistics or questions or things associated with that. So, although I guess this would be the second time we've extended this contract time-wise, it makes sense for a lot of reasons. And I was glad that Robin brought that to our attention. My understanding from Tyler is on the Moscow side, it's an administrative process.
Yeah, since there's not a cost consideration with this, and it's just a time consideration, it's something we can do administratively and then just circle back with the report to our city council on. So it really isn't, I think it makes a lot of sense. And I think that setting that time limit in a way that allows for as much time as we need to adequately roll this out, especially if it's dollars that we've already allocated for the project, I think makes sense.
So with that, we decide maybe August, what we were thinking. And I mean, I think ideally we need a motion of some sort. And your project funded through research dollars, so it would be the 4 major entities that would need to vote on that extension.
So I would move that we authorize the city of Moscow to extend the ALTA contract for the alternate water supply study through the end of August of 2022 with no financial impact, just a time alteration.
Second.
Is there any discussion or questions around that? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed?
So we have that issue too.
Okay, I got
Good.
yes, thumbs up
Yep.
on the screen. Thank you, everybody. Perfect. Well, thank you, Robin. I know we're looking forward to seeing that report. We'll kind of strategize on what that looks like. I know we have a lot of things going on, but in my mind, it seems like we're going to have to put together some sort of workshop or something where we all come together and just hash out some time to work through that.
And I'll send you some updated documents.
Okay. So we'll, I guess, keep an ear and an eye out for more information on that as well as that kind of progresses. Okay, next item, I have the NSF Civic Planning Grant Proposal Letter of Support. And I'm going to ask Tim if you just kind of want to, I know you talked at the committee last meeting, and maybe you just want to give an update on where that's at.
Yeah, that's easy because I keep checking my phone and there's supposed to be a draft the week of April 18th, which is rapidly dwindling. So by tomorrow we'll have a draft. As a little bit, I mean, I think what's holding this up is that the group that's putting it together is also dealing with a major proposal focused on water energy, probably to the tune of multiples of millions. So that's really kind of taking precedent. So this is still going forward. Don't know exactly when that document's supposed to be out, but again, this is just a planning grant proposal, and then if that gets funded, then the rubber really hits the road. And again, it's really focused on essentially water and climate change and the pollutes and thinking about different types of features. So it really fits right in with it. I think everyone's interested in. So
Did we agree to,
Write a letter.
we did? I thought we did.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
So, so Tim has kind of a draft for that goes along with it. And then I think, like you mentioned, we don't 100% know what that looks like and what that would evolve into at this point. It's just committing support.
yeah, well, the task for whoever is on, well, for somebody feedback, I come look at you, Paul, because I know you volunteered. And you can always unvolunteer if you want to. I understand.
No, we won't.
So would be to basically review and provide comments on the proposal when it comes in. It's, again, 7 pages, so it's not an onerous one. And that's pretty much it, I think, for the first round. And then it would be a little bit more involved in the second round. We can also include senior personnel, and that was where I said, if you want to submit a CV or a resume, basically, we can turn that into an NSF bio sketch for you. And again, that's the senior personnel. It goes a little bit more weight to have a partner actually listen to senior personnel.
Is that a criminal background check?
There's no criminal background checks. You can be a felon. Yeah.
As long as there are no drug tests.
And the bio sketch is just a thing on position, education. If you have any publications, that goes in there. I mean, they're very academic kind of oriented, but again, and we'll put it together for you. It's a simple 2-page template.
Can you remind me when the proposal is due?
I'd say it's May 5th, maybe. It's coming up pretty fast.
Okay, I know my initial thought, we just have to see how hiring and stuff goes, is maybe, ideally, the future PBAC executive director would maybe be involved, and, depending on who that person is and their experience and things. I think would play into that potentially really nice, but it'd probably be too late at that point.
I think so.
And so I think I had emailed you with the question. You may not know the answer. I don't know if it'd be too late. If we don't add somebody into the planning proposal, can they get added in?
For sure.
If you were selected for the bigger proposal?
Yeah, that happens a lot as the principal team will change up sometimes.
Okay, so maybe we kind of use that angle, if that's all right. And the committee thinks that that's a good approach, is for now, maybe we do the letter of support. Paul or somebody similarly can be involved with reviewing that initial proposal. And then depending on how that goes, we can look at bringing it back to the committee for further discussion and seeing about getting the executive director.
Okay.
Does that sound good?
Yep, sounds really good. Yeah. Like I say, the planning grant may die on the cutting room floor, and then we're
hopefully not.
Yeah,
hopefully not.
I mean, we'll try again. That's typically with NSF. We usually think it's very rare to get any kind of funding on the. It's the second or third.
I have that our next PBAC meeting will be Thursday, May 19th, at 5 p.m., likely in a room here at U of I facilities. We'll, when the agenda comes out, we'll put that in. And then I guess I'll just open it up for any announcements or good of the order items that anyone wants to bring in. Thank you all for being patient on the other side. I know it was probably hard to not see people, so thank you. Not seeing anything. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Not seeing any opposed. Everybody go enjoy the rest of your Thursday. Thank you all.
Sure.